Hello, Internet, and welcome to Only Lovers Book Club, where I get together with my two favorite Egyptian goddesses and we read a romance. By the way, I'm wearing sunglasses in this hangout because I'm pretending I'm in like the desert, like I'm in Egypt, sun's in my eyes, but like I want to be able to see my like Egyptologist boyfriend. So I'm just like protecting my eyes. And so I had us read The Book of Two Ways by Jodi Picoult, or Picoult, how I used to say it. Now, I made that joke in the chat. I don't know if anyone like laughed.
I did not catch that joke at all. I
I
saw
thought
what
you
you
were
wrote.
talking about coquitex.
I
That's
thought
what-
too.
Right? That's what you thought too, Tashai? Because you said it right after Tashai said the thing about peeing in the elevator.
Yeah,
know,
so I was like,
kind of-
yeah, he pees. And I didn't really know what you meant, but I was like, haha.
Yeah, me too. I was like,
Well,
I never get their jokes, you know? It's like
I literally,
This
it's
must be a
just because
meme.
for the longest time I used to say Jodi Picoult, and I think when I was at work, I worked at the bookstore. I think someone corrected me, like, "Oh, it's Picoult." Like it's normal, and I'm like, "Oh, well, I thought it was Picoult." Anyway, no disrespect to Miss Picoult. Yeah, I chose The Book of Two Ways, and since I'm already talking, let's see what it's about. Why did I think we would like this book? Everything changes in a single moment for Dawn Edelstein. She's on a plane when the flight attendant makes an announcement. Prepare for a crash landing. She braces herself as thoughts flash around her mind. The shocking thing is, the thoughts are not of her husband, but of a man she last saw 15 years ago, Wyatt Armstrong.
Mentira!
Dawn miraculously survives the crash, but so do all of the doubts that have suddenly been raised. She has led a good life. Back in Boston, there is her husband, Brian, their beloved daughter, and her work as a death doula, in which she helps ease the transition between life and death for her clients. But somewhere in Egypt is Wyatt Armstrong, who works as an archaeologist unearthing ancient burial sites, a career that Dawn once studied but was forced to abandon when life suddenly intervened. And now, when it seems that fate is offering her second chances, she is not sure. She is not as sure of the choice she made. This is a long summary, but it's worth it, I guess. After the crash landing, the airline ensures that the survivors are seen by a doctor, then offers transportation to wherever they want to go. The obvious destination is to fly home, but she could take another path, return to the archaeological sites she left years before, reconnect with Wyatt and their unresolved history, and maybe even complete her research on the Book of Two Ways, the first known map of the afterlife. As the story unfolds, Dawn's two possible futures unspool side by side. Calm down, Andrea. As do the secrets and doubts long buried with them. Dawn must confront the questions she's never truly asked. What does a life well lived look like? When we leave this earth, what do we leave behind? Do we make choices, or do our choices make us? And who would you be if you hadn't turned out to be the person you are right now? That sounds great.
That's not what I read.
Yeah, I feel like I read that, but I read some of that. I feel like Miss Picoult, she scammed all of us, but that's okay. And about the author, so Jodi Picoult is a prolific writer. Your mom's probably read one of her books. You probably cried watching one of the movies based on the book. So I'll just read what's on the back of the little flap here. I'll still include the about page to her from her website. Jodi Picoult is Jodi Picoult is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 24 novels, including A Spark of Light, Small Great Things, Leaving Time, The Storyteller, Lone Wolf, Sing You Home, House Rules, Handle with Care, Change of Heart, 19 Minutes, and the one we've all heard about, My Sister's Keeper. She is also the author, with her daughter, Samantha Van Leer, of two young adult novels, Between the Lines and Off the Page. Picoult lives in New Hampshire. And that's her. I kind of pictured Dawn like her. I'm not going to lie. I definitely pictured that was Dawn Edelstein whenever I was thinking about Dawn and what she looked like.
I had the same reaction once I like actually saw the picture. I was like, this description matches what I just read. I just looked it up and the internet says it's Picoult.
Is it Picoult?
Yes.
Someone corrected me and they were wrong.
Oh my God. You got to go back to the store and tell that person to fuck
I'm gonna
off.
beat my supervisor's
La pronunciación que tienen
ass.
lo tienen como P-E-E.
P-E.
And then
that's what I wrote.
And then K-O-E, like Pico.
Wow.
I'm getting on a plane. We're gonna go kick someone's ass.
This changes everything. Let's go. Okay, we have to start over.
Yeah, people are like, sí, yo no sabía hasta que le escuché una entrevista y ella se presentó como Pico.
Well, look at that. Damn. Okay. Anyway, so the reason that I chose this book was, one, I thought it sounded like some messy white lady's midlife crisis, and that's always, that can always be entertaining to watch happen. I initially heard of this book because I took a how to read hieroglyphics class online with my friend Jodi, and one of the people that consulted on this book, Colleen Darnell, she's on Instagram as like vintage Egyptologist. She was giving that class, and at the end of it, she mentioned the book, and I told my friend, I said, hey, like, what? She wrote a book? And Jadida was like, no, she consulted on this one book, and I read what it was about, and I said, this sounds like, this sounds dramatic, and, like second chance at romance, and, it did sound really good. I don't know if it landed really well with everybody. I don't know if this was it. This was like a hit for all of us. So let's go around. Andrea, you can start. What worked for you, what didn't work for you, and spoilers to anybody listening, we're gonna go through the whole book, the premise. So if you haven't read it, pause, go read it, and come back. Or just if you're not someone who cares about spoilers but is like really into Egyptology, then fuck it, just hang out, listen, and let us know what you think. Okay.
I gave it 2 stars. So first of all, I really just wasn't a fan of how the book was written, like the style it was written in. I don't know how else to say it other than like if I hadn't been reading it for book club, I probably wouldn't have finished it. So it's just like a combination of lots of little things. Like I wasn't a super fan of the writing style. I don't do very well with like heavy world building or heavy like historical contexts or like just like big information dumps. Like it's like very hard for me to picture things in my head sometimes when I'm reading. So I tend to like feel very lost. Like I can't easily picture the things they're describing, and I get like confused with names and stuff. So all of the Egypt stuff, for someone who's really into that would have been great, but just for me personally was not hitting. And then I just didn't really like any of because sometimes if I really like a character, like that will help pull me through, but I just didn't really like all the characters. And so it was probably just gonna be like a 3-star for me. Like it was just very like meh for me. And then I got, to the point where I realized everything had been a lie, and I got very angry, and it went down to a 2. Just was not a fan. I think that kind of plot setup, I was telling Chris, like I think works really well if you're reading like a psychological thriller or something, where you're reading it already knowing you're going to be lied to at some point, and that your narrators are unreliable and like all these things, like what you're getting into. And so I think it works really well, but like that's not what I was here for. And so I just felt very disappointed that like the entire book is about the fucking 2 ways and then there's no 2 ways. I just couldn't handle that, and I gave it a 2 because I didn't want to give it a 1 because I can't even remember the last time I gave a book a 1, but in my heart it was a 1, and on Goodreads it's a 2, and this was not for me.
Okay, so I gave this book 4 stars, but I didn't give this book 4 stars because I liked the romance of it. I agree. I was let down in that this was not a book of two ways. This was a book of like, we're going one way, but we're taking like a shortcut in one direction. And then in the other direction, we're kind of like taking the scenic route, but all roads lead back to this like same way.
And like we all knew what way it was like.
Yeah.
You know
I mean,
even if it had been 2 ways, they weren't like 2 ways that were like set up to be competitive. Like one was clearly
yes
from the
okay, romance wise, obviously, like whatever. As soon as I'm like the Egyptologist and he's British, which I also then had some mild beef with this because it's set in Egypt for more than half of the story and it's all white people drama.
Oh yeah.
Menos los que limpian la casa.
Yeah, except for the people who clean the house and the assistants at the Egyptology dig. Everybody else is white.
I knew what I signed up for. I knew what I signed up for. I knew we were going to read some white people being stupid. I just didn't realize what category of stupid it was going to be.
It's fine. It's fine.
Where it was also going to make me like, I texted my sister late at night and I said, hey, I just thought of the thing that I want to tell you on my deathbed. I thought about what I wanted to say and I hope that I get to say it to you and that I don't die suddenly and surprisingly.
Oh my God.
My sister was like, what the fuck?
You should give her your email password and then save it in your drafts folder in case something ever does happen.
Or like tell us so that we know and we can convey that.
Yes. No, anyway, this book made me go there.
Well, okay, so the reason that I gave this 4 stars is because it wasn't because of the romance, it's because of the larger like pseudo-theological conversation. I really liked the research and study part of it. I liked the information about the Egyptian dig and the research that was happening, and the woman who you took the course with did a really good job because I was very like interested in this information about the Egyptology stuff. I was also very interested in like the death doula job. I feel like the description of it isn't realistic.
Yeah, I told Chris, I was like, at some point in my life, I actually looked it up because I thought I would be really good at it. And then I realized that you make 0 money.
Yeah, no, it's definitely just a philanthropic like thing. And yeah, it sounds like a very intense situation. Like, I don't think I could ever be a death doula. I could definitely be the people who get paid to cry at a funeral. Like that, I would do that. I'm great at that. I would just be sobbing, very ugly, like in a very ugly way, so the family would feel comfortable crying too. But so I started reading this book before Thanksgiving break. Like I had borrowed it before end of November, and then my grandma passed away. And so I was reading this book and I already have a lot of anxieties when it comes to death and like meaning and what are we and, you know, hopelessness and all that stuff. Like I have a lot of existential dread just constantly. Everything makes me super anxious. Like I don't know what happened. I hit a point in my 20s when I realized we all die someday and I've never recovered. Like I've never been okay since then. And so reading the technical part of it, the technical descriptions of death, all that stuff was very interesting. And then I had to go through a funeral and then went through my own personal mourning process, went through all that with my parents to then finish the book afterwards. And so it was very intense. I think that there was value in the pure coincidence of the universe that that's the book that I happened to be reading when all of that went down. And so I gave it a good review because it helped me, I think, more easily digest thoughts and feelings that I was going through at the time. Like I appreciated that there's a whole school of thought and study dedicated to the experience of death because it is this thing that I'm just like petrified of. Like it's my biggest fear. But yeah, so that's why I ended up giving the book a higher review. That's probably why I'm not going to forget about this book, is because it happened to have come to me during a very difficult and not really expected time in my life. And I had bought a book on grief and grieving a while ago because I know that these are things that I have to work through, and it's like something that I have to just figure out for myself in order to be able to live my life more fully. And I didn't finish reading that book. I kind of started it, but it was really hard to get through the first few pages because I'm still very deeply affected by the death of my other grandparents from 2009. So it's just, I think that's what it was. Like from then on, it's just been like a super tender subject for me. And so, yeah, I was like, huh. So this gave me a lot of stuff to think about.
I get what you're saying, Tashai. I definitely enjoyed like certain aspects of the book. I think I just couldn't separate that from the rest of the book. But you're right, it did have some like nice meditations.
I'm glad that you found some kind of comfort in reading about it. And I think that's kind of like the whole point of not like the death doula movement and like death positive movement. The more you know, the I don't think you're ever prepared, but I do think that you can have like our society, their thing is like our society wants to like turn a blind eye. We don't want to think about death. We don't want to think about dying. We don't ever want to face it. We don't ever, once it happens, we want to pretend it didn't happen, you know, that it's not going to happen to us. And I think that whenever anything, whenever a family member dies, whenever something tragic happens, doesn't even have to happen to like someone, but like whenever something tragic happens, like, oh my God, you know, it's this whole thing. It's like a gut punch every time. And it's just because we have been brought up, we live in a society and that's just how we view death. And so, yeah, I hear what both of you are saying. I do think because I am really interested in, you know, archaeology in Egypt as a hobby, as just a hobby. I'm definitely that student that came in because she was a fan of Brendan Fraser and the Mummy. That line, that dig, that was meant for me. And I took it. I took that. And there was a line in the book that was like that. And I'm like, ouch. Drea.
That was definitely you. I started reading this and I'm like, yeah, I'm not surprised Christina picked this book. Yeah, as soon as I saw Egyptology, I'm like, yep, this makes sense. It's like if Andrea picked a book about like horse science and horse medicine and a horse rancher and a horse doctor.
Like I still enjoyed the Egyptology stuff, but I did feel like at some points in the book, it did feel like filler. I'm like, why are we lingering on this so much? Why do we have to get so technical on this right now? I don't think that it needed to be quite as in depth. As I mentioned before, like thinking about death and any excuse that I can get to really explore something that makes me fearful or that society has made me feel fearful of is a pretty good thing. I too am afraid of flying. I did not enjoy that first chapter, but that being said, like, you know, maybe it was some things that I just need to confront and need to deal with before I'm just like terrified in the moment of doing it, you know? So yeah, there were some things I definitely liked about this book. The plot was not one of them. It just wasn't it. It wasn't as exciting of a dramatic read as I thought it was going to be.
Also, and this might be like really petty, but like I thought that the whole like drama with her husband was so stupid, right? Like it wasn't just me, right? Like she could not let it go that he like dared to befriend someone that he might have found attractive. I'm like, ¿Qué te pasa? Like he didn't hook up with her. He didn't do shit. And yeah, and she just wouldn't let it go. Es una cosa like be mad about something, but then don't pretend like you're over it and then not let it go. Like I felt like he was stupid and like didn't realize what he was doing, but then she just couldn't let it, like, if you really truly can't let it go, then divorce the person. But don't be like pretending like you're okay with like mending everything and you're here to fix things, but then like keep bringing it up every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
He gave her an excuse to be like, I'm gonna leave this life that is fine but is not amazing.
So let's talk about the guys. Let's talk about the guys. Let's talk about Wyatt and Brian.
Even their fucking names.
Was this really like a book of two ways? And I feel like we've talked about how it's just not. What do you think Dawn chose to do? But I feel like it's very obvious what she does.
She was like she like explicitly said it.
Well, the book is like, I opened my mouth to answer and like leaves it open-ended.
Pero before that, she had told Wyatt, like, yeah, I love you, I just need to like figure out the details or what, like the way I feel like she never told her husband, I want this, but she told Wyatt multiple times, like, I want this, I just have to figure out like the stuff with my daughter, I just have to figure out this. Like, I didn't think it was like a cliffhanger. Like, I felt like it was pretty obvious what.
Yeah. I also think that there was like some conspiracy theorists on on the Goodreads like boards or whatever. Basically, a couple of people were like, well, when she decided not to give that guy the painting, then that was a clue to show that she was going to stay in her marriage because that was just like a fling. But then other people were like, you know, she's clearly leaving for Egypt. Like, what the fuck? Yeah. What are you thinking? So they were having, like, people were arguing about this online, and I was very excited to see that.
I think if anything, her not giving the guy, because she reaches out to him anyway. Like, she does eventually let him know that this woman, she like sends him the obituary. So she lets him know that this woman has passed away. And that, I think, is a hint. But I don't think that her not giving him the letter is a sign of like, oh, she's going to end up with Brian. I think that was the best way that she could offer up some kind of like kindness to Brian to show him that their relationship wasn't worth nothing. Like, because he was so reactive to this idea, I think it stuck with her, and she did it as like a kindness to him as much as a kindness to like the family that she didn't want to break up. I don't think it had anything to do with her relationship with Wyatt. I think it was just her being like, well, do I really want to destroy 2 families? Three
hablando de entregar cosas, I just remembered another pet peeve of mine. I hate when like one action could have like prevented like an entire book. If he had just not hidden the fucking letters, we literally would not have had this entire book. And when I realized that, I got so mad because I hate that.
Okay, here's the thing. I don't mind. I think that's a good like plot device. Obviously, I understand why Brian wouldn't say that, but you're gonna tell me that Dawn was like, oh, so he did write, and then been like, okay, cool, I guess we're gonna try to co-parent. She was so chill about it. I would have been furious. I would have beaten. I would know. I don't think I would have beaten. Same. No, I would have spanked him with the letters. I would have had him bend over and been like, be like, I don't think I would have
spanked him, but I definitely would have been like, do you realize that by withholding this information, you effectively like trapped me in this relationship? Like, I thought I had nothing else. You knew that I was dealing with like this terrible thing that had happened, and you chose to withhold this from me. And if you withheld it from me, it's because you knew deep down that this relationship wasn't strong enough to withhold my past. Mira, so like, this is a relationship under false pretenses.
That's how it started, with him like faking being in the whatchamacallit, and like pretend
the hospice.
yeah, he was like coming in every day, but like that's
fucking creepy. Like
That's
his mom,
creepy.
his grandma died like
he
3
set it up.
years
He
ago,
set
and he
it up
just
to
shows up.
sound like
That
romantic.
is so
Like,
creepy. I was
oh,
like,
he
listen, this
knew
is what
that
I
she
wrote.
needed him, but like, no, that's not romantic.
He like gives her coffee. He knows her lunch order. It's like, why are you still here, bro? Here's the thing.
He was trying to lock it down. I can't blame him, but he still
He was trying to lock it.
He was trying to lock it down, but he's a piece of
shit. During her misery, he was trying to basically trap her during an emotionally vulnerable window of time in her life. And I feel like the other people who worked in that hospice center wouldn't have let this.
They were like, "Oh, it's so romantic." I'm like, dude, that's fucking creepy.
No,
like
if
you were
he had
hanging
no
around
reason
like
to be
end
there.
of life, hanging out in an end of
He
life.
was literally
home.
hanging out, waiting for her mom to die to swoop in. He was waiting for her mom to die to swoop
de
in.
whatever fucking little theories that I didn't understand, but I think we're supposed to like.
Yeah, and here's the thing: like, there are people there will be people out there who will defend Brian, and like if Brian was like an actual person, there is a Brian out there somewhere. He'd be like, no, it's like romantic, and like, no,
yeah, it's Harry Connick Jr.
I'm just saying that some people will be like, oh, this is really romantic, and I'm like, I mean, no, it's actually, I find it very nefarious. This is the subtitle that I put under that question, where it's like, let's talk about the guys. Wyatt did nothing wrong except for be a sexy, rich asshole. And Brian is a piece of shit, hiding letters, emotional cheating, emotional manipulating, gaslighting, creep. That's what it says on my notes.
Who also has like no emotional like depth. Like, oh, you're a scientist, so you're terrible at context clues and having conversations. Like, that's not real.
Here's what didn't gel for me, because like all of the effort that he's putting into like, so he can't be emotionally stupid for one thing and then also for another, at least not in this universe that I'm gonna believe. How is it that he can give, like, it felt like every time he had like a moment with Dawn where they were gonna talk about salvaging their relationship, he would give like these truth bombs that would make her be like, holy wolf, hold up, I need to save this marriage. He would give her like these little speeches about like, you don't realize this, but you were coming home to me. So let me get this straight. You can give all these truth bombs, but you couldn't like fucking figure out your TA was trying to fuck you that entire time. You couldn't figure out that she was giving you special attention. And then the guy, you know, the way that he like romances Dawn, like it's like you've clearly read a book and you've clearly watched a movie. Like, you know where this is going, and suddenly like, oh, now you know you've done a bad thing. And sure, she didn't get over it right away, but he also literally never accepted that he did anything wrong. He never was like, he was always like, oh, well, what if I had sex with her? Would you still be mad at me? And I'm like, motherfucker, that is not the point. The point is that you did something wrong and you need to say you're sorry. You need to say that you're sorry. You need to actually show me that you're remorseful. You need to lick my boots and show me that you actually feel bad for this thing that you
Mira, I hear what you're saying, but I feel like in all those fights, I would get more annoyed with her because she'd be like, let's have sexy sex, and then like fuck him like crazy, and then be like, oh, you bastard, I bet you were thinking about her. And he'd be like, what the fuck? Like,
that's because this scenario is the like most passionate thing that has ever happened in a fucking 15-year marriage. This is the most sex they have ever had because she finally saw that someone else might want to fuck this loser. And so she was like, oh no, like, I need to stake my claim. And then she fucked him, and then she's like, I don't really want him.
El aire acondicionado. ¿Verdad? Wasn't something like that? Le estaba arreglando, que era el aire acondicionado, ¿verdad?
Oh, girl, I don't know.
It was like the least sexy thing I can imagine. Like, I'm just imagining him like leaned over, like butt crack showing. I know that's not how it was in the book. I know, but that's how I was picturing.
She like cut her finger, and he's like, "Oh, let me get you a Band-Aid," and she's like, oh, "I'm so hot for you right now." Like, oh, white people are fucking crazy. What's going on here? That's what I'm saying. It didn't make sense. Brian's character was just bad, and I don't think Wyatt was any better, but he was just not as bad as Brian.
At least like, Wyatt was
very consistent, and he's like hot, smart, and I was like, yes, I would absolutely have sex in the sand for a guy like that. You know what I mean? Like,
Wyatt just had some daddy issues. Wyatt just had some daddy issues. That's the biggest thing.
I think that was another one of my problems with the romance. I couldn't with all the like. It was so hot. It was so dusty. It was so sandy. And I'm like,
they were so horny. It's cold at night in the desert. It's cold at night. I'll give them that. It's cold at night. So Dawn has like this moment where her, you know, where she sees like the path that her life could have taken or whatever, even though technically, structurally, that's not. The book was a scam. It's not technically a book of two ways. Or at least it's not how it's not how it makes it seem like, oh, these are two paths that she could have gone. It's just really a story told out of order. In your life right now, how you are right now, do you think, or do you feel like life has these really big pivotal moments? And if you do, have you ever had like a moment like Dawn? Obviously not as like freaking traumatizing as falling out of the sky, but you know, is there ever a moment that you go back to where you're like, this is the moment where I split, and the decisions that I made here changed my life, and if I had gone this way, then my life would be totally different. And I can go first if you need like time to think about it. That moment for me is, I had to think about it because I was like, okay, I'm going to ask this big ass question and I don't know. I think I need to figure it out. And I think that in life, there are a lot of little moments like that. But I think one of the biggest ones, the most recent one, is deciding to move to the United States, deciding after the hurricane that I was going to quit teaching, finally doing it without like a real backup plan, and moving to the States with Andrea, and, you know, being where I am now because of it. I think about it all the time. What if I'd never left? What if I had just quit my job, but like stayed on the island? What would I be doing? Like, what job would I have now? Like, how my life would have turned out. I don't see it like, I don't look in the past and think of it with regret or anything, but I do think about, you know, what would it have been like if I had stayed on the island? I wouldn't have had the opportunities. So would I have maybe started writing sooner? I don't know. It's one of those things where I can't picture it as clearly as maybe Dawn or Jodi Picoult would have had us think that we can have it planned out. But maybe there is an alternate reality where Chris stayed on the island and became an entrepreneur or something, or figured it out, or moved out and did something else. I don't know. That's mine, where I definitely feel like that was a big moment in my life. What about you guys? Do you have anything like that you'd like to share?
So I was actually thinking about it because I feel like I have like a bunch that are like really depressing, and I didn't want to go with like really depressing. So I found one that's like way more fun, but equally pivotal. And I would say it was my third year of college, or summer between third and fourth year of college, when I went to work at a camp called the Fresh Air Fund just outside of New York City. I was a camp counselor, and that is the summer that I let myself be romanced by a female and discovered that I was not straight, as I had always thought. And had I not gone to work at that camp and met the person that I did, I don't know. I had always been raised to believe I was like one thing, and like there were no other options, and I was like, I just hadn't let myself ever like think about that. And so it took being like out in the woods, I guess, for it to happen. And so, yeah, I don't know. As someone who like discovered that she was queer kind of later in life than a lot of people, I don't know. I don't know if it would have happened or when it would have happened. So yeah, I'm thankful that, because that, you know, I ended up having a relationship with her, and I then ended up exploring like other queer relationships too, and it was literally all because I was like, I want to go help at-risk kids in New York, you know. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you for sharing.
Summer camp love.
I definitely think you would have been gay. You just would have been,
well, maybe take a little, maybe in a different setting,
more quietly gay. Also, that's your fucking adult romance novel.
Oh, yeah.
Once you're ready to write your adult story.
Oh my gosh,
Like
yeah.
but it would be like more new adult, I guess, right? Because it was like in college.
Yeah.
It is whatever you decide it's gonna be.
Ay, ¿cómo
It was,
se llama?
yeah, it was a lot of like perfect. I think she was like very androgynous, and so I think that's
oh my god,
that's why I left my guard down. You know what I mean? It was like, oh,
do you have a title for it, Tashai?
what year was this? Do you have a
uh,
rough year?
2009.
Sapphic Summer 09.
Sapphic Summer 09. Can't wait.
Yeah,
to read it on
Don't ever change.
I went to stay with her in Queens one weekend when we were off from summer camp, and she took me to like my first like she was like very butch, so she took me to like a super like butch club somewhere in New York City where I was like,
you paid for zero.
Only
drinks.
one who clearly stood out. Adult summer camp romance. Where Andrea realized, like, oh, this massage is making me feel things. That was literally the moment where I was like, am I gay?
Yes.
What?
What about you, Tashai? Do you have your what was the pivotal moment, at least, or what was a pivotal moment in your life where things definitely could have gone one way or the other?
So I think the less dramatic one was choosing to pursue English when I went to college instead of biology, because I was really torn between following a science-based career path and a career in the arts. So I think that kind of affected me, because if I had done science, I don't think I would have left PR. Like, I think I would have stayed there and been involved in some sort of research studies there. I would have found something to do. Like, my cousin's doing something similar now. He's studying like animal husbandry and sciences and whatever, and he's getting very involved with like aquatic life production, whatever. Like, he in through no like communication or influence has ended up kind of following a path that is almost like what mine would have been, which is like a super trip to watch, and I'm very envious because he's doing really cool stuff. But definitely the like biggest pivotal moment was just moving to New York. Was, 10 years ago, I got accepted into school and took a giant loan that I didn't understand the ramifications of and did not understand the complications that would arise from making that decision. But I thought it was the only way that I could leave. And I had, it was the kind of thing where if I hadn't gotten into a school, I probably never would have left, because you know how close I am with my family. And it took something like that to propel me to leave. And when I get really sad and really depressed about not being with my family, my parents are very quick to tell me, like, you would not have achieved, like, you weren't like meant to stay here. You needed to see beyond what was going on the island. Like, you've always been so curious. You've always wanted to meet all these sorts of people. Like, you wouldn't have been able to do that if you had stayed. And so that's definitely like the incendiary like moment, like the
I mean, definitely wouldn't have met a Bulgarian man in PR, that's for sure.
I didn't meet my first vegetarian until I had my first semester of school in New York. Like, I had never met a vegetarian before. I'm still friends with her on Instagram. And I still remember when we like talked about going to Taco Bell, and she's like, "Oh, I'm a vegetarian." I was like, "What? Like, that's real? That's like a real thing?" Like, I didn't have hummus until I moved to New York. There was so much that I just didn't know, that I didn't have exposure to. I didn't know I didn't know that many people who were openly gay. I didn't know that many people who just
or like anyone
lived in other places.
A Christian.
Yeah, I didn't know anybody who was like an atheist. I met my first Jewish person when I moved to New York. Like, it really became this whole thing where like I have to look at the bigger picture of it sometimes, because I get really frustrated that I haven't done everything that I set my mind to. But when I do try to take that like step back path of my life, things that I've achieved, things that I haven't achieved, I have grown so much because of that one decision. And it's not necessarily that I achieved everything that I meant to achieve, but I definitely am a lot more thoughtful than I was before I ever moved. I try to be a lot more open-minded. I try to have a lot more perspectives. And all of that is just directly correlates to the fact that I made the hardest decision I've ever had to do, like to make, which was leave my family behind. And it's still really hard, and that's why I cry every time that I say goodbye to them when I go visit them, and I get homesick all the time, and I call them all the time. Like, just because you made the decision doesn't mean that it ever gets easy, having made the decision, but like I had to do it. If I hadn't done it, like
yeah. So now I'm trying to think of like alternate reality, right? So the moment, right, that moment, and then like what happens in this one. So in the other one, I'm imagining Drea being like very straight for a couple more years until until something else would have happened. Girl, you can't outrun
vegan baker.
Yeah, something. It would have been something close quarters or whatever. But then I'm imagining like if it had happened like later, then like you both have your fiancés now. So like would you have met your partner, the partners that you're in with, the partners that you're with right now? Like what would that look like if that happened later on down the line, or like if Tashai, if you had stayed, and I don't think that you wouldn't have, like, I think that you probably would have become like a very prestigious, you could have become a very prestigious marine biologist and, met your first vegetarian in a conference that you went to where you were in this life not nervous to present in front of, how to save the manatees.
I do think we can all agree, though, that saying yes to Only Lovers was also a pivotal moment, because now here we are 6 years later.
Here we are.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, yeah, because not only is it like, oh, we're reading romance books and we've been doing this forever, but there's been a lot of like personal growth and just acquiring new perspectives that were just a natural result of the kinds of books that we then started challenging each other to read. And that's something that I tell people when I tell them about book club. I say, we're really trying to make ourselves read more diversely, because that's the only way that you can get a brighter, clearer understanding of the perspectives of everyone around you. Like, you have to force yourself to read things that are different. Otherwise, everything's always going to sound the same.
If you didn't ask yourself, would I fuck someone to save humankind? I mean, like, how are you going to ever be an empathetic person?
I think because the book didn't have as much romance and didn't have as much drama as I anticipated, but it did have like a lot of contemplative things in it, and I did want to like, I do think that starting this book club after that fucking breakup, that traumatizing breakup, was probably one of the best ideas I've ever had.
Yo, oh my God. That was a big pivotal part of your life too, by the way, because you would have been
married and pregnant and with no friends. Yeah, I would have lost my friendship with you. I would have staying with him meant that I was choosing him over you, and then that would have been the end.
I mean, here's the thing. I would not have necessarily let that happen.
Yeah.
I would have just upped my sneakiness of trying to get to you.
Yeah, I mean, I could be pretty sneaky.
And then maybe I would have, like, at some point ended up getting into a physical altercation with him. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like I could have taken him.
You could have. He looked big, but he was just pudgy. Yeah.
It
wasn't strong. Thank you for sticking it out this far into the hangout. We had a lot of thoughts. And as always, I'm just grateful that I'm able to talk about them with you guys. And that this is the timeline where I get to chill with you guys. So we will be back together to record at the end of the month with the final pick of the year, which is Tashai's pick, which is a sweet young adult pick. And yeah, I hope you guys are staying safe. Wash your masks. Boosted. And we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Thank you for hanging out with us. You can support Only Lovers Book Club by dropping some change in our tip jar and buying some books with our bookshop link. You can find us on Instagram at Only Lovers Book Club, and from there, find our individual accounts and projects. Feel free to favorite or rate us if that's an option for you, but always make sure to like and subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode.